Hi there, welcome back to the Ginescast. I'm your host, Gina.annunziato. Thank you so much for joining me. Here's something that I wrote up because the news is a crazy place to be, and I think you need to know about it, and I like talking about it, and I'd like to talk about it more, but let me just give you a general oversight of the things that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and the things that kind of go inside my head and stay there and have no chance of getting out unless I podcast them, I guess. So I thank you so much for listening. I thank you for sticking with me and subscribing to this brand new channel, which you should do if you haven't already. So in the meantime, please sit back and enjoy the Ginescast number 17, Nice to News You. I feel like I talk about being in the newsroom a lot, but I mean, it's a big part of my life, whether I want to admit that or not. Because when you've been doing something for 10 years, something you never even studied in college and learned purely by immersion, I mean, it kind of becomes part of who you are, does it not? And these days, with this mile a minute, mile a second news cycle that we're living in, I kind of no longer know how I feel about that. News people are cut from a different kind of cloth. I can't tell you how many times I would call other news stations while on the Fox News assignment desk and say, "Oh, hi, it's Gina from Fox, how are you?" And the assignment desk editor from the affiliate station would answer back, "Oh, you know, living the dream." The undertone to that, of course, being, what the literal fuck am I doing in this sadistic line of work? News is a strange business. It's one that you weirdly find comfort in, because no matter how crazy things will get, you will find people who want to hear the news instead of finding it out for themselves. People like it when someone brings them the news. Or they'll want someone who has the experience of news or the expertise to kind of confirm their own findings. Obviously, it feels good when someone validates what you're thinking too, especially if it's someone who is important enough to be on television night after night. And I'm just going to speak for myself from here on out because that's obviously the only thing I can do. But this industry in current year 2018 is really starting to make me question a lot of things. A lot of who I am, what I stand for, what I'm seeing, and where I'm ultimately going. I'm a naturally inquisitive person, so maybe this isn't the worst thing in the world to do, but I can't help but feel like I'm not getting any sort of answers to all my questions. I'm just getting more and more questions. The news has become one big joke with no punchline to me. Reporters become the story. On-air personalities are the least biased people ever, and I can't separate the real news from the fake news anymore. The fake news that our president just peddles on Twitter all the time. Of course, this is just me exaggerating. I personally don't put false information out on air. And luckily, the show that I currently work on is quite neutral and moderate, even though it is, at its heart, a business show. But I still question everything I see, and I wonder how people even begin to believe half the bullshit spat in their faces day after day, week after week, month after month, and election cycle after election cycle. News people kind of speak differently to one another. There's never any quote-unquote hot debate going on in the newsroom. Oh no. It's basically what's gonna look best on air. What's the best thing for your show? The best full screen you can pull? The most clever banner that you can write? What your audience cares about the most? A friend of mine and I were talking about news a couple weeks back, and all she had to do was mention the word mattress, and I immediately knew she was talking about former EPA Chief Scott Pruitt, who weirdly bought a used mattress from a Trump hotel. She just had to say one word, and I was like, I know that story. It's because news people are bombarded with a deluge of news all the time in this day and age. There's so much of it. It's almost useless to ask one of us folks, "Hey, did you hear this story about?" Because odds are, we have. What I personally care most about is making sure that all my information is correct, that my guests are prepped the best that they could, I have the best visuals for the stories that I'm working on, and all my shit is spelled correctly, because it is a nightmare when misspellings err. But it happens. It's very easy to forget that people are actually watching your news shows sometimes, because when you sit in that control room, it's more about how your show physically looks. Sure, you're listening to what your host says and what your guests say, and sometimes you cringe at the things they say or laugh, and that's inevitable. But you are far too hyper-focused on the things that an average viewer will simply pass by or just not see. It becomes this weird attached but not attached kind of mindset that you have to just really dunk yourself in order to get through the day. And it's kind of getting harder and harder for me to separate this newsroom mindset that I've cultivated from the one that I have in my real life, so to speak. News and opinion is blending more and more. I see it, and I think you see it too. And I don't know what we can actually do about it anymore. The network with one of the lowest ratings, and I'm talking about CNN here, they seem to be in the news more often for how they're reporting versus what they're reporting on. Their anchors and pundits become the story. And I'm talking about you, Jim Acosta. And from my viewpoint, it seems people on that network are the most vocal more often with their opinions, especially in the social media sphere. And maybe I'm just being biased from my time at Fox News, but it feels like I get way more opinions out of those guys than I do from other networks. That to me includes MSNBC, which I think does a great job when they present straight news packages. Same with CBS. Hey, I'm just trying to be fair and balanced here. But this opinion masquerading as news is what is forming such a divide for me. You can literally get a news story out of any old random feeling nowadays. Just because you feel like something is sexist or racist or fucking fatphobic, it automatically becomes that, leading you to get a byline on The Guardian with your wonderful article that you wrote about the thing. And then that one person's opinion sets off an internet firestorm, which leads the mainstream to pick it up, and then you get all these pundits talking about how terribly sexist or racist or fatphobic this thing is, or maybe they don't think the thing is sexist or racist or fatphobic, and then the other network just decries the network's coverage of said events. It just goes on and on and on until the next outrageous thing grabs our attention for that specific news hour. It is very hard for me to separate internet news from the mainstream news these days. And maybe that's just because every 2-bit journalist who exists has a blue check mark on Twitter or a large net they cast out on Facebook. And then there comes a certain kind of hypocrisy I see with news personalities who air their ultra-personal views out on Twitter. I'm not saying they can't do this, of course. Of course they're allowed to do it. Just like the president is allowed to act as shitposter-in-chief on Twitter. But this contradiction just remains. How the hell am I supposed to take anyone seriously or trust anyone when I know so much about their personal views? How can I take them seriously when they try to report on like a bipartisan bill or even just a straight news event? Are we at the point where oversaturation has completely ruined news as we see it? The disheartening thing for me is the lack of journalistic trust from your regular Joe Schmo. And I get why, because there are a lot of ethics breaches that are coming full force right up to the surface. It is the year of accountability after all. But I will defend my newsroom brethren till the very end. Especially when some lame ass on Twitter thinks they know more about newsroom life than I do. There is this constant that exists online where everyone suddenly becomes an expert in a field that's a hot topic within the mainstream. Take Judge Kavanaugh's Senate Judiciary hearing taking place on September 4th. You'd think all these half-wits who have an opinion, they seem to know the ins and outs of the law or the congressional hearings, but I bet you that 94% of the people who are liking these kinds of tweets on Twitter, they can't name who the committee chairman is. It's Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, by the way. And this is my podcast. I'm allowed to flex my moral superiority muscles just a little bit. But this kind of mindset and this attitude continues. If there's a shooting somewhere, the person becomes a Second Amendment expert. Bombing in Syria, foreign relations expert. On and on and on until I start to question who these quote-unquote network contributors even are anymore. It's like anyone who strings the correct sentence together is the one who gets airtime. And we've got to hear about it. We've got to discuss it. We've got to maybe distort what they actually said so it fits my agenda. And we're going to do that over and over again. All these pundits are going to do it until a news story or political talking point is so ground up it becomes an unrecognizable powder that gets blown into their audience's faces for them to just absorb by absorption. As you can tell, I've thought a lot about this, and I appreciate you listening to what goes on inside my head day after day. News never stops, because it's always what's happening. But I still question things that are happening. I don't trust easily, and I don't trust 99% of the things that go out on the airwaves. It's becoming increasingly difficult for me to find just straight news stories about an occurrence in the news. I type economy into Google and I get 400 stories about how Trump is fucking up the economy, apparently. I type in immigration, Trump is bad at immigration and here's why you should care. Everything leads back to the lightning rod of the world's bullshit, which is President Donald J. Trump. And I wonder what the world is even gonna be like after he's out of office in 6 years. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I wonder, can news even survive? What's it gonna be like? Because at this point, he's the one driving everything forward, whether we like to admit it or not. Journalists online can't help retweeting his tweets. They make news stories out of his tweets. I get 5 emails every time the man tweets. I shit you not. They're acting offended on everyone else's behalf because of a tweet he made. It is just never ending. And it's frustrating. And it is so depressing. And yet, I keep doing it. Day after day, I put on a show. And that can mean 2 things. I surprisingly have a very tough facade in the face of news. You have to, when literally anything can happen at a moment's notice. You can make fun of newsroom people all you want, but they are some of the toughest and strongest people on this planet. We're not doctors or firefighters or cops or soldiers, and I don't think we are. Of course not. But there's a mental toughness that comes with being in the news field that unfortunately goes largely unnoticed these days. And that's because most news people have become so goddamn insufferable, I can see why more people are shutting off the televisions and opting for real fucking life. Maybe for me, I just lack someone in my life who truly understands me. Maybe that's kind of what's frustrating me, and I'm taking it out on the newsroom. I'm immersed in a world of questions, a world of what-ifs, a world of unknowing, and having to report on it. And there's no one in my immediate vicinity who gets that. I really try and relate to people, but the moment those personal opinions make an appearance, they run. It's too intense. They've got to jet or be mad at me. It's all very confusing. And that's because this is a confusing world. We're so plugged in, so switched on, so woke over issues and manufactured in our outrage. It's very hard to pick a lane. It's hard to even relate to people anymore. And I wonder, what's it going to take? I think you can start by switching it all off from time to time, finding other things to put your energy toward. Cultivate a new path, because being angry on Twitter.com seems like a really pathetic way to make a living. I don't know. That's not my life. This is my life. This is the life I've chosen at this point. And I don't have to stay here forever. And don't get me wrong, I love what I do. I'm glad I do what I do. I'm glad to be part of this conversation. And I'm glad that I'm good at what I do. And I know I'll only get better the more that I do it. But I beg you, for your own sake, know when to shut it off. Because I can't. Everything seems so fake, so calculated, such a simulation that I honestly can't tell what's real anymore. But this is the life I chose, so I can't really complain. But please, let me live vicariously through you, those who can switch it off day after day. It's a luxury to be able to do that. And it's a luxury to accept that. Maybe just taking some time and maybe not taking every bit of quote-unquote news so seriously. Maybe that's what we need to actually meet each other again. Because right now I feel like we're so far apart on so many things that that bridge will never be built again. But I hope I'm wrong. I really, really do. Because the way I see it, switching off seems to be the only way to turn it all back on. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ginescast. Like I said, I would love to talk more about the news world or just maybe news stories that are piquing people's interest. I have to get better at doing this and maybe doing it more than once a week, but that all comes with time. The more comfortable I get doing this and the more I find my swing of things with the new gig and all that good stuff. I'm not looking for anything specific at this time, but please feel free to email me if you have any ideas or things that you'd like me to talk about, because this is a brand new channel, guys, so it's kind of a clean slate here, which is pretty cool now that I think about it. The Ginescast comes out every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you like this cast, please leave a comment below, give it a like, or share it with someone that you think would like it. And please make sure to subscribe to this brand new channel. If you want more from me, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch at HelloGines, or shoot me an email at gina.annunziato@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ginescast. I'm your host, Gina Annunziato, and I'll see you next time. Take care.